welcome to the Ogles channel. Thanks for watching today, and let's continue our journey to finish every single Game Boy and Game Boy Color game. Today I focus on a game called Donkey Kong Country for the Game Boy Color. Now Donkey Kong Country is a fairly unique title because it's literally the SNES game, just sort of downsized or condensed down to being a Game Boy Color game, which is a pretty impressive feat because Donkey Kong Country is one of the most advanced 16-bit games, and Game Boy Color is 8-bit at the max. And so like literally half the power, but they're still able to get all the levels in there, all the bosses in there, all the enemies in there, the soundtrack is in there. Yeah, it's toned down a little bit, but it's still the exact same music, just simply Game Boy version of it. And even extra features inside the game itself. And so it's pretty amazing feat here to take a SNES game and put it on the Game Boy Color. And that's exactly what Donkey Kong Country has done. Now this particular game did get moved up in our queue a little bit because Hot Wheels 555 requested one of my earlier videos, so naturally moves up in the queue. If there's a game that you want to see me cover sooner or later, let me know the name of the game in the comments down below. Just like Donkey Kong Country, I'll move it right on up. But let's go ahead and jump into the actual game. Now I always like to start the videos up looking at the box art for the game first. And the box art for Donkey Kong Country, yeah, it does have Donkey Kong right in the center. It has the logo at the top, but there's just something about the cover like I just don't like. Like Donkey Kong is a little bit too vibrant in the colors here. Even Donkey Kong Country logo is a little bit too vibrant. It reminds me more of like the Donkey Kong Country TV show that was around at the same time, which I never really liked the animation for that. I don't know, like if you look back at the cover for Donkey Kong Country on the SNES, like I don't know, like the coloring is just a little bit different. The animation is a little bit different, and I just preferred SNES version over this one. And one other detail I just now noticed is in the SNES, he doesn't have a DK on the tie, and he does have a DK on his tie here for the Game Boy. And so, I don't know, it does describe the game just fine, but I just personally don't care for this cover as much as the other one. Now, when you do load it up here, you have a very impressive intro of the Rareware logo coming in, very much of a technical feat there. And then you have the Donkey Kong theme music playing in the background, and yeah, it's 8-bit, but man, did they transfer it over really well. And I have to say that's like for the entire soundtrack. Every song from the original game is going to be in the Game Boy, just toned down a little bit. And I'll let a little bit of the title music play right here just so you can see the, I don't know, the technical feat of transferring it over. To me, it sounds great, and believe it or not, there's actually some songs on the Game Boy Color version that I think sound better than the SNES, just simply because I really enjoy like 8-bit music instead of the 16-bit orchestrated sometimes. But that's only like 1 or 2 songs, and we'll get to them in the review here. But the title screen in the background, they did strip away the really cool animation and the fun intro from the SNES, and you just simply have a background image here of DK and Diddy Kong swimming away from a shark. And I mean, it looks good. I mean, it's really, you know, an impressive image for the Game Boy Color. But man, like that original intro, I really do miss it because that was like such a, I don't know, bombastic intro to really get you pumped for the game and let you know, hey, this isn't the old Donkey Kong, this is the new Donkey Kong, and really ushered in a new era. And this one certainly does not do that. And then you get to the main menu here, and the image for DK here actually looks more in line with like the N64 game. Even like the way the menu is done and like the background colors. I mean, it's around the same era as the N64 game, so it makes sense they're trying to like line up. And I guess maybe like the cover art actually lines up more with the DK64 to a degree as well. I'm pretty sure it's like when his tie first started saying DK, but I could be wrong. You can let me know in the comments down below when the DK very first appeared. But there are several different parts of the menu. You can go with the options, which are, you know, basic options there. The adventure mode, which is the classic game that we're going to go through to get the credits to roll. There's the print option, which allows you to print like different images represented inside the game, as well as like an entire alphabet here and number system that has an individual DK artwork to go along with it. And I don't know anybody who probably ever printed this out, but it's a pretty cool looking selection here. And like I could see somebody doing a pretty cool little art project or, you know, video about that. But a really cool alphabet with some really unique images in there. Just a sad little detail that they decided to add into the Game Boy version here. And then you have the bonus. And the bonus is like all these different mini games. Like you can go through one here called Funky Fishing, which allows you to sort of fish off your boat here and, you know, pull fish up and flop them into your boat. And then you have Crosshair Cranky, which allows you to basically take target practice here. But it actually controls really weird. I didn't enjoy this mini game too much. But there's a lot of stuff you can unlock inside the game itself. And when you finish the game, you get like extra unlockables. And also like when you accomplish different things in the main story mode, you get more unlockables. So there's like a decent bit of a post-game content for players who want to continue on and collect everything. But let's go and get into the adventure mode. Now, when you started up here, the overworld map, I guess it's called like DK Island maybe, I'm not really sure the title of it, but it actually looks really darn good for the Game Boy. Yes, it's less detailed, but the colors are fairly vibrant. You can make out all the different areas that you're going to visit to. I feel like they did a good job, you know, condensing it down to the Game Boy version. And then you go into world number 1, which is going to be the Kong Jungle. And once again, it looks less detailed, but I think it still looks good enough you know, to carry on the spirit of the SNES game. And then you go into the first level here, which is going to be Jungle Hijinks. And pretty much identical level to the SNES. And that's going to be true for, I think, every level inside the game. I'm not like a super huge expert on Donkey Kong Country, so there may be a few more minute details that I don't pick up on. But most of the levels do appear to be very darn close, with just simply a few effects that are going to be a little bit different. You can go into your little house up above, get the little bonus balloon. All the bonus games are going to be intact as you go as well. Same enemies, same spots, the vultures, the kremlins, all of them. And even the ability to find your animals inside the crate is inside the game as well. However, instead of being able to like get on top of the animal and ride the animal, which was like a really cool feature for the game, now you just simply become the animal, which is not as cool, but it's still a neat feature. I think that's how it did in Donkey Kong Land, so they're sort of transferring that over. And I will also say, like, the point of view is zoomed in a little bit, like not a ton. It's not as bad as some games on the Game Boy, but it definitely feels like it's zoomed in a little bit, and it's going to cause you to die a few times inside the game. Not so much in the first level, but as you get further into it, it's like the mine carts and things like that. That's going to cause a little bit more trouble, and sometimes the vultures tend to take you out a little bit as well. But it's definitely going to be zoomed in just a little bit, which is going to cause you to die a few extra deaths as you go. And also, I'm talking about differences here. Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong do not follow directly behind the main character like you do in the SNES game. They're simply positioned in a little barrel off to the bottom left. That's how it was done in the Donkey Kong Land series, and I'm assuming it's just simply because if they put too much on the screen at once, it does have some slowdown, because there are going to be times in the game where slowdown does take place, and if you had another sprite on the screen all times, I feel like it would probably slow it down even more. And before we move on to like the next level here, or I guess while we're moving on into it, I do want to talk about like the graphics inside the game itself. They are definitely toned down from the SNES. They're more akin to Donkey Kong Land, like I mentioned a few other details. However, like the big separation of Donkey Kong Land and Donkey Kong Country, outside of course, you know, being the adventures and the levels themselves, is going to be the color. And the color does make a massive, massive difference in these games. Because in Donkey Kong Land, like all the colors were just simply black and white, and the atmospheres and their backgrounds and enemies and your main character, they all blurred together to be almost like a blurry mess. In this game though, they did a really good job as far as like distinguishing the foreground, the background, your character, the enemy characters, and they're not going to be the same as the Super Nintendo version, but they are going to be able to be seen very well on the screen. You can make out all the details, and you can make out all the action so much better. And so, yes, it's not going to be as good as SNES. No one expected that, but it's still going to be very able to be seen and very playable on the Game Boy. But at the same time, there are going to be a few instances where we're going to have to sort of poke fun at the game itself, and that's going to happen when we go into the next level, Ropey Rampage here. We get our first look at the armadillo, and man, he must have got Midas' touch or something, because they like turned this armadillo completely gold. And I'm sure it's to separate it from the background a little bit and from DK himself, because you don't want the browns to blur together. But I mean, my gosh, like he's definitely a golden armadillo at this point. You know, he's probably worth a little bit of money if you were to capture him. And it's also in this level I noticed for the first time that hitboxes appear to be just a little bit different in the Game Boy version than the SNES version, because there were several instances where I felt like I didn't even really get close to enemy and I still took damage, or I got, you know, killed off here, or I felt like I was like right on top of the enemy and should have killed them, and then nothing happened. And it just seemed like the hitboxes were off a little bit, and especially if the vultures that were like shooting out their you know, little acorns at you. There were a lot of things, but the vultures seemed to give me the most trouble when it came to the hitboxes inside the game. Then we come across Cranky's cabin here, and Cranky really does focus on, you know, his little old man insults to you. Talks about how you're a young whippersnapper and how like you wouldn't remember games like the original Game & Watch, and you don't appreciate the old games. And I've always enjoyed Cranky Kong, and so his little one-liners inside this game are pretty great. He does give you hints as far as like secret areas that you can find inside the game. And if you want to go for like 100% and unlock some of the bonus stuff I was talking about earlier, you can do all that. I didn't worry about it too much in this particular playthrough, but I was glad to see old Cranky Kong back inside this one. Then we go off into Reptile Rumble. Now, Reptile Rumble is going to be a cave level, and yes, once again, it doesn't look as good as the SNES, but look how much better it looks than the Game Boy version of Donkey Kong Land. In the caves of Donkey Kong Land, you could barely see like what was going on, and here it's very vibrant, it's very clear. You can see every little bit of the detail pretty much perfectly to make sure you know what's going on the screen. It's also in the level we get the snakes, the bees, you know, the usual cave creatures here. Then we go to Coral Capers, and this is our first underwater level to sort of determine the differences between the core version and this version. And honestly, like the foreground images all come through really well as far as like the different corals, the colors on that. The background could use a little bit, you know, more detail on it. It's just more or less a blank screen in the background. But all the creatures, you know, the octopus, the fish, all that, they look really good inside the game. The field of view and the water level does throw me off a little bit more again. just simply because you can't really see too far ahead of you. And so, but other than that, they did a pretty good job here. Then we come across Funky's Flights, and if you want to travel anywhere else into the world, you can of course go back into the main map and travel through. We've not accessed any other levels or any other worlds in the game, so Funky's Flights is sort of useless at this point. And then we come across Barrel Cannon Canyon. Say that 3 times fast. Barrel Cannon Canyon. Barrel Canyon. See, I'm already messing it up, but but this level is always most notable to me because I had that barrel part at the bottom where you could skip like half the level. And once again, it's intact in the Game Boy Color version, and the barrel action seems to work pretty smoothly on the Game Boy. There's never an instance like where the barrels are moving so fast, like you can't, the field of view messes you up. All the barrels translated really well over to the Game Boy. And then we come across our first encounter with Candy Kong, and every time you encounter her on the map, she's going to give you like a little mini game where you can earn like extra bananas, extra lives, or like little Donkey Kong coins. And if you collect more of the coins, of course, you unlock more things, like I said earlier. I'm not going to go through every single candy challenge, but as far as like the graphics wise, you know, translated pretty good over to the Game Boy here, and the mini games all seem, you know, pretty fun. And then we get to our very first boss here, Very Naughty's, spelled with a G, Lair, and he's a giant beaver, same as the Super Nintendo game. He's very golden in this game, and Troopy totally blurs into the bananas in the background. I feel like they should have stuck with the gray on the beaver. I think some of the beavers in the regular levels are gray, but this one here, they went with a very golden look. Doesn't translate over really well, and I feel like the coloring is a little bit off, but the gameplay action for him, exactly the same. And then we journey into level 2, which is going to be the Monkey Mines. And the first world in Monkey Mines is Winky's Walkway. I tell you, like, some of these names I did not remember from the SNES version until I was playing here on the Game Boy. Some of them have some pretty funny titles. But in this level in particular, like I talked about the hitboxes earlier, the buzzards or the vultures, I don't know which one they are, in this level, like there's one instance here at the beginning, I died like 5 times trying to get this right. And I was getting pretty darn frustrated because I felt like the hitboxes were definitely off at this point. And throughout this entire level, the buzzards or the vultures are going to give me a heck of a lot of trouble. Sorry about that. And it's also in this level that we come across our first instance where we can get the animal being the frog. And I know all the animals have names and whatnot, but I just don't know them off the top of my head. And the frog, he's looking a little rough here. Like some of the details on the frog did not shine through very well. It looks more like a green blob. But still, you are able to access the frog and you can journey through the level. I did not realize like you can't actually pick up barrels or bust barrels when you are the frog, which was a little bit disappointing because then you couldn't get, you know, the DK back up or Diddy Kong back up. But still, you know, I always enjoy being the frog, and even if he's a green blob, the frog is still there. And then we come across the Minecart Carnage, and this level here, like I said, the field of view does mess you up a little bit. It's definitely harder on the Game Boy than the Super Nintendo, but the graphics I feel like held up pretty darn good. And so overall, it's still a fun level, but it's more difficult, and you're going to have to pay really close attention like what's coming up in front of you and have very fast reaction speed. Otherwise, you're going to end up hitting, you know, the broken minecarts or the Kremlins and things like that. And it's going to take you a few more tries to probably get through this level. Then we have the Bouncing Bonanza, which is a ton of tires, and outside of that, it's probably your usual stuff. I never really enjoyed the tire mechanics in the Donkey Kong Country as a general rule. Really like any bouncy platform, all the way like to Mario 1. You hit those little like springs you bounce on. I never could get the bouncing to go exactly how I wanted. But that's going to be the Bouncing Bonanza. And then we go to the Stop and Go Station. And this was one of my favorite levels in the core game, and even held up pretty much perfectly in the Game Boy Color. And I don't feel like you could do this particular level justice at all if you didn't have the color, because when it's red, it means, you know, all the enemies are running back and forth and they can attack you. And then you have go, they go to sleep, and sort of like a green background surrounds them. And the mechanics work great. You're able to go just as fast in the Game Boy version as SNES version. The field of view didn't affect you as much. And man, I adored this particular level. It's just a great level, and I feel like it held up extraordinarily well for the Game Boy. And let's keep that trend going, because on Millstone Mayhem is going to have the aesthetics of the ancient city, and this is always one of my favorite levels in the game as well. And I really think they did a great job capturing the atmosphere on the Game Boy. There are a few minor differences here and there, but for an overall, I feel like the level looks very similar. And as a fan of the original level, I felt like the fun value was pretty much the same. And then we have the boss for level 2, which is going to be Necky's Nuts, which is a really questionable title there. But Necky, he basically sticks his little neck out here and he shoots his little nuts at you. And you hop on the little tire here and then hop on his head. Very, very simple. And truth be told, like, all the bosses in this entire game are extraordinarily easy. You go through some pretty challenging, you know, platforming aspects. And then we get to the boss, it's like a cakewalk every single time. But Necky's Nuts is of no exception. And I feel like it looked pretty good for a boss battle in comparison to the Naughty's lair earlier. And then we come across the third level, which is going to be Vine Valley, and this one does look a good bit different than the SNES, but there's something like peaceful about like the way they chose to go with the painting and sort of the shading here. It's definitely different, but I can't say it's like a whole lot worse because I actually enjoy sort of the I don't know, sereneness of the particular landscape they've created here. Now the first level we're going to go into is Vulture Culture, and the treetops looks fine. There's really nothing to write home about that. And then we come across Treetop Town, which was another one of my favorites from the SNES. I always enjoyed like the little, I don't know, the tree houses up in the sky here and just journeying from one to the other. I always thought the graphics were just top notch on the SNES, and they are good here on the Game Boy. But you can see in the background, like the background is completely missing in the Game Boy, and they pretty much just sort of replaced it with a blue aqua looking tone. And at first it bothered me, but the more I looked at it, there was like something about like add like a different atmosphere to the level, and I still ended up liking the level just as much as the SNES. It just simply had a different feel with the aesthetic of it. But it's also in Treetop Town that I noticed the game is beginning to slow down a little bit. Like there's instances where there's just simply too much going on the screen at once, and the game does get a little bit on the dropping of the frame rate. And I'm not really one to like worry about frame rate a whole lot, but on these older games, especially like for the Game Boy, when they cram too much on the screen, like when a slowdown happens, like you know a slowdown is happening. And it definitely begins in Treetop Town, and as the game gets more, I guess, advanced as it goes on, more enemies and more visuals, it's going to get slowed down a little bit more often. And then Forest Frenzy is going to continue on with the same aesthetic as Vulture Culture, as far as like, you know, the forest atmosphere. And then you come across Temple Tempest, and Temple Tempest continues on the same atmosphere as the ancient ruins we had earlier, but there was always something in Temple Tempest that I looked forward to in the game. It was this giant wheel that would chase after you throughout the level. And the wheel is here, but it's not as large, and like it does take away from some of the dynamics of the game. And I can't help but say, like when it loaded up and I saw how small the wheel was, like the stakes didn't feel as big, and it just, I don't know, it just didn't seem as grandeur to me, and I was disappointed in this particular level. I really was expecting that giant wheel, and maybe I've hyped it up in my mind. Maybe the wheel wasn't as big as I remember it being, but it definitely felt really small on the Game Boy. And the next level is the Orangutan Gang, and I have to say, like the orangutans, even like in the SNES as a kid, I always felt like they were some of the hardest enemies in the entire game. Harder than pretty much every boss, obviously, but some of the hardest ones you're going to come across, and that's really annoying. But you do get the ostrich in this level, and I always loved getting the ostrich, and the same mechanics, you know, stand up for the ostrich. You know, you can glide through the little level here, get some pretty good speeds, pretty good jump out of it, and I don't know, there's the animals in Donkey Kong Country really do like make the game to me. And I'm so happy they're inside the game. I do wish you could, you know, ride on them, but hey, you know, we make small concessions here to get on the Game Boy. Then we have Clam City, and Clam City is another underwater level, and there's a ton of clams in this one, hence the name of the level. And the clams shoot out these little, you know, pearls at you. But on the Game Boy, the pearls look so similar to the bubbles that sometimes I'd get hit by the clams or the pearls, and when I thought they were bubbles. And so like I was taking damage constantly, having to swap back and forth, losing lives, and I have to say Clam City was an annoying level. And then we have our next boss, who's going to be Bumblebee Rumble, and this boss is pretty much crazy easy. All you have to do is pick up the barrel here, hit the Bumblebee when he comes to you, and then he gets angry and sort of jumps up in the air, left and right, and all you have to do is like take one step to the left, one step to the right, and you can avoid every single little bounce up and down. Pick up the barrel, repeat the process, and if you thought the other enemies were easy, this one's like a whole new level of easiness inside the game. And then we have level 4 here is going to be the Gorilla Glacier, and this is of course the snow level in the game. And I generally love like all snow levels, but there's something about like the snow levels in Donkey Kong Country, the first one anyway, that it captures a different aspect of winter than like when you think of like Christmas and the holidays, like Diddy Kong Racing and Banjo-Kazooie and like Mario 64 and I don't know, like every Mario Kart 64, like every snow level has like a Christmas little jingle behind it. But the snow levels in Donkey Kong Country always captured like the depressing aspect of winter. And I'd almost compare it like to in the Mother games when you have like the winter theme. Like it always captured like the sadness and the depression part of winter. And I always felt like the I don't know, the Glacier levels or the winter levels in Donkey Kong Country 1 captured that same feeling to me. And I feel like the Game Boy even took it a step further here because like through all of them, like the background is going to be sort of like a 3-tone color. So you have the foreground, the middle ground, and the background's always got like sort of a dark purple pinkish color, and it like adds to the sadness to it. And that's the best way I can describe it. The Gorilla Glacier, if I was really going to sum up the entire world here in one fell swoop, I would say it's just a sad looking level. That is until you're in the caves, and the caves, of course, don't have that same sadness. And the caves do have some pretty cool aspects to them, as far as like the ropes that, you know, zoom you all the way to the top or zoom you all the way to the bottom, and you have to do pretty quick little jumping here. The platform is pretty much on spot for that. And also when you go into like, you know, the underwater levels, the sadness is not going to be there. But anytime you're like in the main world here, the winter sadness is present. And I also want to talk about the level Torchlight Trouble in the Gorilla Glacier, because this is a level where you get the parrot. And when you get the parrot, he actually appears on the screen with you, unlike the other animals where you have to ride him. The parrot is on the screen at the same time, and he's in charge of having like a light above you so you can see. But on the SNES, it had such a cool light effect. It had like, you know, like a little, I don't know, beam of light that would come out. And when you turn the parrot, the beam of light would come to the screen off to the side. Not the case at all on the Game Boy. It just simply lights the screen up. Like, it really does ruin the cool effect of the parrot, and I feel like they could have done a little bit better with it. This feels like a very lazy way to get the parrot in there, and it's like, why not just make the level brighter to begin with? If you get the parrot immediately, you can't lose the parrot, and I don't know, like, they really ruined the parrot's impact on the game. And the boss for Gorilla Glacier is not going to have anything to do with the overall level itself. You get a really gnarly rampage, which is the first boss back again. Not really different from the first boss, maybe a little bit faster, maybe a few different moves, but still just as easy. And I always felt like, why are we recycling so many bosses in this game? I do sometimes feel like Donkey Kong Country hit like a point in development where they do begin to recycle a few things, like some of the level aspects, some of the enemies, and in particular some of the bosses. Like, there was no reason to have this giant beaver back again. And then in level 5, we have the Crimcroc Industries, and there's something about like these particular levels that just hold up really well for the Game Boy. I think it was like the minimalistic coloring for the SNES and bringing it over to the Game Boy just allowed to shine as best it could. Sort of the dark backgrounds, like the oil cans, the little fires. It just creates that dynamic that the Game Boy can handle really well. It was a fairly difficult level. All of these are fairly difficult levels in the Crimcroc Industries. But we have things like the Trick Track Track. Boy, they really do love their tongue twisters here, which is a pretty long and fairly dull one. But it's also a fairly difficult one as you're going through here. You have the Elevator Antics, which has all these little elevator carts you have to jump up and down on. And the point of view does zoom in a little bit too far for some of these to be really easy levels. You have the Poison Pond, which is a underwater level, and the only thing they did to make it poison was change the background to sort of a poisonous green, which, I mean, it made the poison effect, but, you know, it's still sort of a lame downgrade from the SNES. Then you have Minecart Madness, and this is once again going to have the same point of view or field of view problems here where you can't see too far ahead of you. I did finally get a bonus level here where I actually got to play as the frog, go through and collect all the little frog tokens, and I always like those in the actual game, and so I was actually glad I actually found one of those. And then we have Blackout Basement, which has like lights on, lights off effect, and I can't remember exactly how it looked on the SNES, but it had to have looked better than it does here on the Game Boy. It just simply doesn't look great as far as like the effects that they're using. Then we have a Drum, which is going to be a giant drum boss, and all he does is sort of like shake out enemies. You kill the enemies, and then he comes down and tries to squish you. Really easy to dodge, really easy to kill all the enemies. Once again, super easy boss in the game. And I'm not gonna lie, like, of all the bosses, like, I didn't remember this one really well from the SNES. I know he was in there, but like, I didn't have a lot of memories with him. And so I don't know, it's just sort of odd, like this one, just not one that like sticks in my head when it comes to bosses inside of Donkey Kong. And then we go into the final world of the game, which is going to be Chimp Caverns, and the first level here is going to be called Tanked Up Trouble, which has a little platform that sort of, you know, slides around on a little track here, and it does run out of fuel, and you have to hop up and get all these little fuel containers throughout. It does mix the gameplay up a little bit, and it's not any different than SNES, but it is nice to have a little bit of a different platforming aspects as you're journeying into the later stages of the game. The second level is called Maniac Miners, and it's an average little cave level. Nothing really to write home about that. And the same thing can be said for Neck Nutmare. Or maybe it's Necky's Nutmare, and I just wrote it down wrong. It's probably referring to, you know, the giant vulture there. Another little cave level. But there's one level called Misty Mine, which does try to have like a mist effect over the top of it. And really just sort of like, you know, sort of, I guess sort of had like a little cloudy effect, which I guess is a mist. But I don't know, it doesn't look too great on the Game Boy. Probably looked better on the SNES. Another lights on off level, and then you do have Platform Perils, which has tons of platforms like rising, falling, left and right, and especially with the field of view being so zoomed in, this level is fairly hard and probably took the most tries inside the game to get all of these little platforms just right. And then when you get to the final boss of this last level, before we get to the ultimate boss in the game, would be Necky's Revenge, and it's pretty much the same crazy bird as before, and really easy. Like, the bosses are, I think the bosses in this game are a bit of a letdown. I really do feel that way. And even when we get to the final boss here, which is going to be on the Gangplank Galleon with King K. Rool, when you go up against him, like, yeah, it's a different looking boss, but it's still a really easy boss battle. You have a King K. Rool here. He basically throws a little crown off at you, tries to hit you, and it flies away. You just hop on his head, and then he runs from left to right, and you have to just hop over him. And once you've done that 3 times, then he throws his crown again, hit him, and then he starts shooting cannonballs down from the ceiling, and you take him out, and you think you finished the game, like, because then the credits begin to roll, and it's credits with a K, you know, for Kong and all of that. And then it says the end with a question mark, and I was busy writing down my journal here, you know, trying to, you know, keep up all the notes for the game. And as I was doing that, I forgot, like, I guess the hidden ending, or not hidden ending, but the trick ending for the game. And then King K. Rool came up and killed me. I had to redo the entire thing over again, and there's actually a 3rd stage after the credits where he basically has like a little bouncy effect going across the screen. And it is definitely the hardest boss in the entire game, but it's still not hard. Most players are probably going to get it first or second try here. And after you finished him up there, Cranky says that the horde has been returned, and then he also has to get his little cranky insult in there, saying like if he had done, you know, gone through the adventure mode, he could have found all the secrets. And like, you know, you lazy little fella here, you couldn't catch all the secrets. He would have got every single one of them. And then the real credits begin to roll, and the real credits are really colorful. They're really fun, show different scenes throughout the game. A great system of credits here, and little pictures of Donkey Kong at the close. A really weird one was like coming out of the Game Boy. An odd little scene for Donkey Kong. But let's talk about the game as an overall now. First off, like, it is very close to the SNES, and you really can't give it enough credit for that. They took a 16-bit game, turned it into an 8-bit game, and they really kept all the levels there, they kept all the enemies there, all the bosses there. They did a great job keeping the original game and the original feel of the game for the Game Boy. Like, when you're playing it, it feels like Donkey Kong Country. There's, you know, no doubt about that. That's a positive for the game. Another positive is there's tons of little bonuses that you can collect. There's tons of little bonus mini games that you can find. There's a lot of extra post-game content for a particular game. And I guess the third bonus, or the third, I guess, benefit of the game, or pro of the game, is just simply fun. Like, I had a good time going through this game. Just like when I played Donkey Kong Country, I have a pretty good time going through that. I had a pretty good time going through this one. So I feel like it captured the feel of that particular game. But let's talk about some of the, I guess, downsides or the cons of the game. Yes, the graphics are noticeably way worse on this particular system. And that's to be expected. But at the same time, like, in this day and age, if you're going to play Donkey Kong Country, there are so many better ways to play it. Just play the SNES version. I think there's a Game Boy Advance version that came out, which I'm sure is better than this one as well. And so there are way better ways to play Donkey Kong Country. This would be the worst experience for the games you could possibly go through. And in the year 2024, or whenever you end up watching this video, there are better ways to play the game. Play the game on those particular systems. Also, there's a lot of slowdown in this game, like especially in the later levels. You're going to get tons of slowdown from the enemies, like when you have a barrel on the screen with multiple enemies, and it's just simply going to come into like a slugfest there for a little bit. And I also feel like the hitboxes are off inside the game. They're not like always off, but it did feel enough times that I was like, okay, something's weird about the hitboxes, and I'm not a fan of that. But as a whole, I'd probably give the game a 6.5 out of 10. I feel like there's enough cons here to sort of knock the score back several notches, but at the same time, it still is impressive that what it did, bringing a Super Nintendo game over to the Game Boy, and like I said, enough credit can't be given to it for that. But what do you think? Did you enjoy? Oh! Before we get to that, I also forgot, during the credits, there's an amazing song that plays, and I always loved the original one for the Donkey Kong Country game, but it was a little bit too orchestrated, and I know some people would like say that's blasphemy, but I feel like the Game Boy version, like with the 8-bit sounds, it just does better for this beautiful, I don't know, credit song for Donkey Kong Country. I'll let a little bit of it play right here. I don't know, which one do you think is better? Let me know in the comments down below. But as always, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Check out my other videos, list stuff above, and go out there, find a great game to play. Simply have a great rest of the day.